Interesting. I came out of college debt-free with a bunch of money in the bank. And the first CPA firm that I worked for regularly bounced my paycheck. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
That clip you just heard was local CPA and co-host of the R2 podcast, John Duffield. John Duffield is a local product raised in Arvin, came out to Bakersfield, got his education, and went to work in the CPA world. Took a little brief hiatus from that and then opened up his own practice. And since then has purchased 4 other practices and got to where he is today as a very successful CPA firm here in Bakersfield. Father of 3, married, does a lot for the local community. I know he's involved with BCHS. Been a guy that I've actually gone to quite a few times to bounce some ideas off of. Just got a great business perspective, great life outlook, fun to hang out with, fun to go get a couple cocktails with, quite frankly. Just all around good guy. So got some good advice for our young listeners who are maybe starting to get to a point where they're deciding what they're going to do educationally, career-wise. Obviously has some good entrepreneurial perspectives. So stay tuned and enjoy the show with John Duffield.
Welcome back to the Our 2 Cents podcast, the show where your local professionals sit down with an array of guests to hear their story and impart some wisdom for both business and life-improving skills. This is your place to hear business and community leaders discuss relevant topics that matter to you.
And welcome back to the R2 Cents podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Jones, and I am joined in studio today with a very special guest. One that you've actually heard before as a host, and that is local CPA and colleague of mine, Mr. John Duffield. John, how are you today, bud?
Doing really good, Kyle. What's happening with you?
Well, I just got over COVID about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And
is that your first time getting COVID?
First time, yeah. I made it through all the variants.
Do you think that was the Omicron variant?
I think it was just because how quickly it ran through our office and my house and everyone I know,
right,
virtually in town. And as you know, our office is right here by the Kaiser building, so I drive home every day past it and driving to work past it. And you know, the last 2-3 weeks, the line of cars that are getting testing is
down the street,
wrapped around the parking lot, all the way down Camino Media. So we're 2 years in a pandemic, and I never seen anything like that before. So it had to been the Omicron.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is I had the first flavor, kind of back in January of 2021, last year, about right now, last year. That was not the Omicron variant, I don't think. And it was interesting kind of going through that. It was definitely knew that I was sick, but it wasn't something that I felt like you question yourself all the time, like what's next, what's going to happen. But I really never felt like my life was really at risk. And so I didn't feel great, you know what I mean? But it was a flu or a bad cold or whatever is kind of what it was. I'm not convinced that I didn't have it again recently, the Omicron variant, but I took a test and showed up negative. So there's like nothing, but I'm like, nah, but I don't feel nothing. I don't feel perfect.
Well, see, that's the thing though. There's other colds going around, right? We have tons of viruses we deal with every year. We have the flu virus this time of year too. So obviously when someone's ill right now, your mind goes to COVID because we're inundated with it for the last 2 years, but there's other things you can get still and, which could cause you to feel bad. But,
absolutely.
But no, I'm well. I had 2 bad days and then on my road to recovery. I was glad the CDC announced that you can come back after 5 days if you have no symptoms and a negative test. So I was hoping that would be the case, but I tested positive again. So I stayed away from here for the full 10 days.
Oh, well.
Right back.
So you tested twice and were positive both
times.
Okay. All right. Yeah, good.
Anyway. Okay, John. So what we're doing today for our listeners here, and this is going to be the first of about 5, there's 5 hosts, is we're actually going to take turns interviewing each other and getting a little background of each of the hosts for the R2 Cents podcast. And we decided to do that because we talked to various business and community leaders, entrepreneurs, and we realized, well, that's kind of all what we are together, and we're the ones doing the interviews. So we wanted to kind of give our stories and our backgrounds to give, I guess, listeners a little more background as to who we are and where we're coming from as we're interviewing all these guests here in Bakersfield, all these, like I said, business and community leaders. So John, you drew the shortest straw, and you're going to be the first one.
I usually do.
So I know a little bit about you, so it's going to be kind of easier to start this off, but I know you're an Arvin boy. Kind of give us a background of where you started, where you got your education, and how you became to be a entrepreneur and a business owner.
Yeah. So Kyle, it's pretty easy. Grew up in Arvin, California. After that, you try to figure out what you do. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but at the very least, I was going to go, I was going to do some college of some sort. So I went to Bakersfield Community College, and candidly, that's where I decided I was going to be an accountant. Right, wrong, or indifferent was in an accounting class, and going to the career center up there, I decided I was going to be an accountant and a CPA ultimately. and made the decision. And I want to say that, it's not like that I had perfect clarity on the whole thing. There's this, amazing vision, but basically where it happened.
Let me interject here. So when you say I knew I was going to go CPA accountant, working for somebody or having your own business, was that in your thought process then?
You know what, Kyle, I don't know. I've always had a job, and I've always stayed really busy and worked hard. And so I've always been what I call money motivated. And so I didn't necessarily say that, hey, I'm going to be self-employed as a CPA. I don't remember saying that, but I knew I was going to be a CPA. I knew I was going to make a lot of money somehow. There was a second component of that, by the way. Got the real estate bug. And so I was going to buy real estate properties and build an active real estate portfolio back then, as that was part of my long-term vision. And so that's kind of the road that I started down was to go do that. I went from Cal State Bakersfield to CSUB, from BC to CSUB, yeah. Continue to go down that road. I was working at United Parcel Service while I was doing that, by the way. I worked kind of the morning loading crew from 4 a.m. till, 8 or 8:30, whatever it was that day. And so I would go to school during the day or night or whatever, and then worked at United Parcel Service.
Is that when you met Scotty Garrison? Or
yeah, that's where I met Scotty G and met him and a whole bunch of other guys that I'm still friends with to this day. Was working at UPS, and we called it the preload back then. And so anyways, great organization to work for. It was great for me because it fit well with college, being 4 or 5 hours a day, and it paid relatively well. And what else are you doing between 4 and 8 in the morning, right?
Usually sleeping.
Sleeping. So anyways, got that done, graduated, went to work for another.
Well, hold on. You're going too fast now. I'm an interjector. So we've had a lot of guests recently talking about college, value of college, the cost of college, ROI. Let me ask you personally. Now, did you finance your own college? You take out loans?
No, I paid for family help. No, okay. I paid for everything myself.
Okay.
And I paid for every bit of it myself. No family help. It was all me. I moved out of Arvin. I think I was 17 when I officially moved out of Arvin to Bakersfield, and basically paid for college and at BC or CSUB, and I had some family help and things of that nature, but basically paid for everything. And so if you ask me, is college worth it? For my profession, you have to have that bachelor's degree in order to get your CPA license ultimately. So I had to do it. I don't have to do it at Harvard,
sure,
but I have to do it, right?
And did you pay for it yourself? And you paid for yourself by working, or you actually took out some loans? I didn't get.
No, working.
Okay, so you came out of college debt free.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now,
yeah, interesting. I came out of college debt-free with a bunch of money in the bank. And, I was telling somebody else a story the other day. The first CPA firm that I worked for regularly bounced my paycheck. The CPA firm regularly bounced our paychecks, right? Like the employees' paychecks.
Right, uh-huh.
Yeah. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And very simply, the reason why it took me twice to go, okay, this is a pattern, right? And so I stopped just depositing my paycheck into my checking account, and I would go to their bank to go, hey, are these funds good? Yes, they're good. I'd put the money in my pocket. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't good, I'd walk away and come back the next day, right? The interesting part about that was, Kyle, the firm that I worked for, there was about 15 people there in firm-wide in this organization, and probably they had a computer consulting division at the time. But on the accounting side, there were 10 or 12 of us. And I went in lowest guy on the totem pole, and within a year and a half or something of that, I was number one. Well, why was I number one? Because everybody else quit.
Because they weren't getting paid.
They weren't getting paid. And so it was the best thing in the world for me because, I got a ton of exposure and moved up really quickly and got a lot of responsibility and a lot of education in a very short period of time. And so, but I had money in the bank from United Parcel Service.
Without that bankroll, you probably would have been one of the ones that had to quit, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but I had money in the bank. I took a cut in pay effectively. I made less money starting as an accountant for a CPA firm than I had been making, in college. Now, I worked UPS, but then I would work other summer jobs. I worked at Jamara Vineyards in the sheds, and I ran a night loading crew with forklifts and did some different things kind of during the year to help supplement that UPS money. But I took a cut in pay. I made less money for almost 2 years working in an accounting firm than I had made when I was in college.
Working for UPS.
Yeah.
That's great. So, obviously for you, the decision was easy. With your career path you chose, you had to go to college, so it wasn't a matter of an ROI. But looking back at it now, and advice for any young listeners we have out there, whether that option to work and pay for it as you go is not there for them, what are your thoughts on taking out loans to obtain a 4-year degree? Yeah,
Kyle, the one thing, and by the way, this is a huge area of passion for me, is I don't think enough of us, and I say us, including me, find what our true path in life honestly is, like our passion, like, what we were made to do. Like, what were you, Kyle Jones, specifically designed to do? I don't think enough of us absolutely find out what that is. And so, it's funny, we take my son to Fresno State. He's going to go to college, and the little girl that's, giving the campus tour and taking us around, she giggled and said something about the average student here changes majors 3 times, okay? And she was like, they changed, we don't have to worry about that because everybody changes their major like 2 times or 3 times, and giggled, right? And I thought that's really cute, but if you're the person paying for all those changes, it's not really that funny, right? And so those people don't know what they're going to go do. And so they're moving from program to program, trying to figure out what it is to stick. And so, I'm a guy that thinks that, well, maybe I don't need to go to Harvard to change and figure out what I'm going to go do. Ideally, we would get some real sense of what we were made to do and what we're personally passionate about, and then we could go do that. And I think that could be at Cal State Bakersfield or Fresno State or Harvard. It really doesn't matter at that point in time. So, I don't know, for specialty professions, if I'm going to be a neurosurgeon or I'm going to be an attorney or a CPA or something, then, I think those educations matter, and maybe to some degree the location matters. But for a lot of professions, including the accounting profession, it doesn't make any difference. I know some CPAs here in Bakersfield, phenomenally successful. They went to Cal State Bakersfield. And so it's a matter of you and your drive.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. What I find interesting and what I go back and forth on, actually, my wife and I have talked about this because we have 3 you have 3 boys. I have 3 young girls. And ours a little behind yours, but we're going to be facing the same decisions that you've been facing the last couple of years and are going to be facing the next couple of years, is that, so I agree with what you're saying, but my perspective is you don't have to necessarily find out what you want to do or what your passion is or what your career path is while you're going to school. So for me, the idea of taking a couple of years off and working and to me, that's a fine way to kind of figure out what you want to do. My wife and I had, who kind of did that similar route, said no, because then life gets in the way, right? You may do something stupid, get married, you may meet someone, or you may
do something stupid, get married.
Right. At a young age. So, and then you may not ever get a chance to go back to college, right? You may start working. Life happens. So I kind of go back and forth on, and I fully understand her point as well. So her perspective is, if our kids can get into a 4-year school and we have the money to pay for it, I'm sending them there, and I'm like, well, what if they don't know what they want to do? Why are we going to send them somewhere special that costs a lot of money just to party? They can party here if they want. So I kind of go back and forth on that.
Kyle, my middle son, Austin, went to Fresno State College, went in as a construction management student and with a business administration minor, and then decided relatively quickly that he didn't want to do construction management. So he flipped them. Okay, well, I'm going to stay in construction, but now it's business emphasis. And then like the next year or 2 years later, he just dropped construction altogether, right? I think college was phenomenal for Austin for a number of different reasons. And I don't think it was all about, the education that he got from the school. I think it was the friends that he made and the experiences that he had and the education, right? I do think there was definitely education in there.
Critical thinking,
I think it was for the experience, right? He was not living at home. He moved out of the house and he was in a different community and, had to exist on his own. And so I think it was really good for a lot of reasons. Now, I don't know that he had to go to Yale, for that experience necessarily, but I think it was good that he was in college and went away and everything else. And so, by the way, Austin today is in sales, for a national company. And it's not something that he had a great foundation at Fresno State University to be a sales executive like he is today. He came out of college, ended up being in management at one of the local Target stores. And I think that, the fact that he was a Fresno State graduate helped him to get that job at Target. I know that it did. Mm-hmm. It got him the job because of the degree, but from there, it's not as though everything that he learned in school, he was able to apply immediately on the job necessarily. From there, then took a different position in the sales position that he is now in today. So, this is what I think. I think most people, most kids or whatever, they're not introspective enough. They don't have enough perspective to really know themselves well enough to know what they like and they don't like and everything else.
Did you at that age, 17, 18, 19?
Not at all.
Especially men or boys, call them boys at that age really, but we tend to mature a little slower. And
if ever.
If ever. Right. And so to make that kind of those life decisions at 17, 18, to me, it's like you got to put a little more thought into it.
Well, and I've talked to you before about one of my kind of favorite organizations, Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation, that very comprehensive aptitude testing center. My oldest son, Blake, went through there and went through the test, and we spent a lot of time on his test results. Once he got his test back, we went through that. And one interesting thing that I did for him is, the nerd that I am, we put together an Excel spreadsheet, and we said, of all these different, internal traits you have, these unknown, attributes that you have, which schools in college should you be going to, right? And so we said, for this particular thing, you should be going to the School of Business. For this particular thing, it was health management, right? So he had a couple of different things, but the majority of what he had pointed him towards the School of Business in college. And so when he went to Cal State Bakersfield, ultimately, that's what he did. He said, okay, School of Business, as opposed to go, hey, I think I like engineering or whatever, right? The health department or whatever. And so, he didn't go in there and go, hey, I'm going to go be this position, but I'm going to go into the School of Business. And then within the business school, then started to narrow it down to some more specific professions. So,
and did that fulfill him?
Yeah, I think so. I think very much so.
Devil's advocate. So was that a fulfillment because he had this test and it said he's supposed to do it, so he does it, and I feel it, or
no? Because I think Johnson O'Connor's that good. I think you can't goose their system. I think you can't cheat on their system.
So let me ask you: do you recommend that for all young kids?
For sure.
And what's the cost of that? Do you recall?
$700.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 2 3.5 hour tests, followed by an hour exit interview. And this is, I've recommended a lot of clients to go through this program. I think there's incredible value, incredible knowledge by utilizing their program. I really honestly do. If I showed you the testing, you'd be like, holy crap, this is amazing. This is amazing as the result of what they provide you with. Where the failure is, in my opinion, is that we as parents need to spend a lot of time, drawing it to a conclusion after you get the results of the test, right? Johnson O'Connor does to a certain degree, but then they send you home with a lot of homework.
You can't just hold the paper and be like, oh, okay, I did it.
Yeah.
Toss it in the drawer.
So I'll guarantee you, based on what I know about them and what I've watched from them, they can ring the bell. They can go, Kyle, this is what you're supposed to do, is this, right? I know they can do that, but they won't do it. They just refuse to. And so they will say, based on your test, these are typically the types of things that somebody with your, internal attributes, right, these are the things you're supposed to be doing. They'll go draw this pattern. It's kind of like, this is what you need to look for. Now go do it on your own, right? And so that's the part that I don't know how many people follow through. I did with my oldest son, Blake.
Did you do the two other, all the boys?
All three of them.
Okay.
Yeah, all three of them went through there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Interesting. Okay, well, I didn't mean to. I know this is not about your boys' show, but it's
fascinating
fascinating topic. We talked a lot about
that's a passion of mine, though, right? And so, Kyle, I think I've been, relatively successful as a CPA, as somebody that's self-employed. I'm self-employed today, and I think I've been relatively successful that way. I have a lot of doubt. I question my success every day, but I think in the scheme of life, I think I've done okay. But I question myself every day, like, was I specifically designed for something different than what I do today, right? I think we're all guilty of that. I'm sure you,
for sure.
I think we all do. And so I've never had anything like Johnson O'Connor's, program. I think, that there's a lot of kids that don't know what they want to do. They don't have the foggiest idea. 70% of our population is unhappy with the jobs that they have. If we all got it figured out, why are 3/4 of us unhappy doing what we're doing? And so to me, that doesn't make sense. And so a little bit more direction, that's all it is. I'm not saying a specific answer, but a little bit more direction on where we're going.
More information, more knowledge, more tools to work with.
And these are internal unknown attributes that you have that you may not even know these skills. You may not even know these are things that are special about you, right? You may not even know that this is special about you and this, is in evidence about you. And so, I think for a kid that's facing going to college, maybe we're questioning that, right? And then it's going to change majors a couple of times. Does it make sense to go spend, some real time and $700 to get a little bit more insight as to you? Yeah, I think so.
And I don't want to beat on we'll move on, but so it sounds like John's requirement or recommendation would be to do it actually before you start applying to colleges, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because it sounds like it kind of gears you to what
Johnson
colleges,
O'Connor will
right?
tell you that these traits, these internal traits, start to show up, and they're pretty evident by about your 8th grade year, freshman year of high school.
Okay, so maybe early on in high school would be a reasonable time to do that.
Junior year of high school, or maybe the summer before your senior year.
Okay,
something to that effect. I think
because you're applying your senior year fall, right? Usually you start throwing applications out there and you learn about it in January.
If not your junior year, right?
Okay.
You could be doing that. Yeah. So maybe summer before your junior year, or during your junior year, you can go take that test. Johnson O'Connor, I got to tell you the quick backstory, started in 1932. Because of the human resources department of a national corporation. And basically the CEO of this company came down to the HR department and said, we're convinced we have the best manufacturing equipment in the world, but we don't think we have the best people on the right jobs. And so we want you to start studying people to make sure we have the right people in the right positions in the right jobs, right? The head of HR at this company, his name was Johnson O'Connor. And so this nonprofit aptitude testing center was formed based off of him. That company was General Electric, GE as we know them. Yeah, GE is the one that effectively founded this and kind of started this in the 30s. That's all they do. They have 7 United States testing locations.
And the closest one here is Fresno?
No. Los Angeles,
LA,
downtown
okay.
Los Angeles, one in San Francisco, there's one in Houston.
Okay.
And so, but that's all they do. That's all the organization does is they just do comprehensive aptitude testing. And so pretty fascinating stuff that they do. But there's a lot of aptitude type tests that are floating around and available, but they're the only one that I know that does it kind of the way that they do and is in a comprehensive manner in what they do. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So moving back a little bit, you graduated Cal State, you worked at UPS, got your first job at CPA firm, moved up there relatively quickly because they couldn't manage payroll.
Yeah.
And so when did you branch out? You mentioned you're an entrepreneur. So when did that happen?
So from that firm, I got kind of what I would call a headhunter call from another CPA here in Bakersfield that said, hey, we've heard your name. You've got a great reputation. We're looking for somebody. We want to know whether or not you might be looking, to make a move to a different job. And let's go to lunch. And so another firm ended up, calling me. In fact, a guy that I was partners with for a long time named Rick Williams called me with his then partner, Richard Hawley, said, hey, we want to take you to lunch. And so we went to lunch and, here's the thing, we're interviewing, we're going to hire for this position. And you have to know and love Rick Williams. He's a very direct guy. He's like, at the end of lunch, he's like, well, you want the job or not? And so, and I was like, well, I need to think about it. And he's like, no. Do you want the job or not? And I said, yeah, I'll take the job. And so anyways,
sight unseen,
basically sight unseen, right? Ended up going to work for those guys and kind of the rest is history from there. It ended up going to work to that firm in 1988, by the way, became a partner with Rick in 1992. And so I was in that partnership for a long time. Ultimately, I sold out of my partnership with Rick in about the year 2000. And so I was with him for that period of time. And then I was out of the profession for a little while.
I do remember that, yeah.
Yeah. So I got my securities license and was managing pension money. That's how you and I met, right? We were both in the MoneyWise guys building, right? Yeah.
On Ming Avenue at that point.
At Ming Avenue, right. Yeah. And so was kind of on the asset management side and the pension management side. And did that for about 5 years, but then kept calling back to the accounting profession. And I had clients that were calling me. I had people keep asking me about it. And so kind of the role that I was filling in the asset management world, I didn't like it as well, as I liked the accounting side. And so I just decided to make the move and go back. And so I kind of started all over from scratch again, if you will, about 2005 and started my quote CPA firm all over again. So,
but that's when you started your own practice.
Yeah.
Right. And you, for a little while after that, I believe you kind of wore 2 hats for a little bit. I think you were still involved in securities a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think as soon as your practice really started to flourish, I think you kind of let that go.
Yeah, I did. I got so busy back on the accounting side again that it just didn't make sense. And so, and by the way, as you know, the ownership and MoneyWise changed. And so there were just some changes there. And so it just was kind of just a whole bunch of events that happened at the same time that just kind of made sense to make kind of a permanent move, if you will. And so,
let me ask you this. Do you think you were prepared to take on the responsibilities of being a business owner and the CPA, the administrative stuff? We jokingly talked about it off there before we started recording about ordering paper and payroll employees and marketing. And was that something that you felt like you were prepared for? You had a passion?
I wouldn't. I definitely don't have a passion for it necessarily. I'm a conservative accountant or a tightwad accountant, depending on how you want to say it. So part of me likes that role because I can kind of control expenditures and make buying decisions, based on how I think things should work. So part of me likes it from that perspective. I can kind of control some of the expenditures. Was I prepared to take on the role? Absolutely. Just because I just know it has to be done. The part that I tell what I call these new entrepreneurs that, they go out into business on their own. Maybe it's somebody that's a welder, or maybe it's somebody that has a machine shop or something. They're everything, right? I got a client right now that's starting a business. He does some engineering work and some design work, and he does some fabrication. He's everything, right? He's ordering the paper. He's taking out the trash. He's sweeping the floors. He's doing the accounting. He's got to do a little bit of everything. And so, daylight business hours, 8 to 5, he's got to be that engineer, that professional. But the other hours, he's got to fill all those administrative tasks, right? And so I was up for that. I mean, I knew it had to be done, and I was willing to do it because I was willing to work the hours to do it. I can't suggest that I love it necessarily, but I still do it to this day to a decent extent. And so when it comes to, we've got a fairly large office today, but when it comes to ordering paper and supplies and things like that, I still do a lot of that today.
Right. And we're also just talking before we get, you're at 13 employees, correct?
On the payroll today.
Payroll's 13.
Yeah. Well, so part of that seasonal staff,
Sure.
I told you that.
Right.
Part of that is seasonal staff.
Which we are getting into tax season.
Yeah, that won't stay around after tax season. But yeah, that we're a team of 13 today. So yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but since that 2005, I think you've purchased 3 practices. Is that correct?
I'm on my fourth. Right, yeah.
Okay. So you started your own and then and purchased 4th, or in the process of purchasing the 4th practice to grow it to where it is today.
Correct.
How's that for a strategy for people who want to grow? What people are out there who are thinking about purchasing other business that are already in place?
Yeah. So I know that answer, and I think the answer is it just depends, right? And so, I listen to a ton of podcasts, right? We're doing a podcast today to educate our listeners.
Right.
I listen to tons of them.
Same here.
I listen to podcasts on accounting nerds. And so I was listening to one the other day on kind of practice growth or practice management. And this particular firm has been buying up a lot of firms. But the guy kind of stopped and he said, I think we've been making a mistake, because we now know that our marketing team is so good that we're able to generate the same amount of revenues for about 50 to 60 cents on the dollar. The accounting profession, if you were to go buy an accounting practice today, the typical number is going to be 1 times to 1.25 times gross revenues, gross collections, right? That's what they typically are going to sell for. So this guy said, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to pay 1 times gross revenues. I'm going to go buy it for 60% of or 50% of gross revenues because of my internal marketing team. He said, our internal marketing team is so strong that we're able to do it for about 50 to 60 cents on the dollar, and we're able to add enough revenues that satisfies us. And so I think that's fantastic, right?
If you can make that work.
They've figured out their model for them. They've figured out how to make that work. Now, I don't know what their marketing scheme looks like. I don't know that. They're not divulging that, fortunately or unfortunately, but that's really good. So he said, why would I go buy a practice when I can effectively generate it organically for about 50 to 60 cents on the dollar myself? And he said, that's number one. Number two, guess what? When you buy a practice, all of a sudden, all those revenues come on immediately. And he said it's a little bit of a mess because you're bringing on all these employees immediately and all these clients on immediately and all these other things. He goes, it's not like that when we do it organically, because
you're slowly
building it, right? You're adding this business slowly, as you choose. And if you want faster growth, you spend more money on marketing.
If you don't, you turn down the knob a little bit.
You turn down the knob.
You
slow it back a little bit. So it was really interesting to see.
Do you think that is applicable to other businesses, not just CPA?
I absolutely do think it is. I think it's based on it depends, which means, who's that entrepreneur and what sales model did they figure out, right? What marketing model
did they bring into,
and what's their hustle? How motivated are they? Because the right entrepreneur, I think, can to some degree can go do that on his own, right? I mean, if you said go add $1 billion in revenues next year by your own marketing methods, well, maybe not, right?
Kind of an extreme, yeah.
Yeah, well, it is an extreme, but I did that intentionally. On the other hand, if we say, well, if I'm a $5 million firm and I want to have 10 or 20% revenue growth next year through our own organic way, maybe that's doable from your internal marketing programs, right?
Yeah, and so where you're at right now, John, your typical client here in Bakersfield, is it, what are you looking for at this point, or what fits your practice right now? Is it 1040s? Is it businesses?
After Cal State Bakersfield, by the way, I went and got a master's degree at Golden Gate University out of Los Angeles, so I have a master's degree in taxation.
Oh, that's right. We skipped over that.
So I did that back and I fulfilled 2 things. I was getting continuing education and getting a master's degree at the same time. So Kyle, taxation has always been my emphasis because of that master's degree. I've got a great foundation in tax, and so that's kind of been always my emphasis in that world. The client that we serve best is a business client, quite honestly, somebody that needs, great tax strategies and great tax advice, but somebody that needs advice from, as they're going on throughout the year. Somebody that, are we helping you with financial statements?
Right.
Are we reviewing financial statements with you? Are we helping you to show you what key metrics that might have some effect on your business? Those are the people that I can have some tremendous influence on. Kyle, clients that I call them high net worth individuals that need planning and want somebody to look at it from a different perspective. I frequently have clients, we sit down with their personal financial statements and I will help them restructure things. So
that's more of from a planning perspective, right?
This planning perspective, yeah.
Right. So someone who, husband and wife who are W-2 TurboTax, that's not something that your practice is geared towards. I mean, because really what value you're providing, I guess is way I look at it.
Yeah, Kyle, I got to tell you, one of my, kind of reflections in life and my career, and we do a lot of 1040s for the record. We do a lot in our office. So we serve a lot of those people, but I've sat back and I've looked at these clients over the years, and what's happened in many, many circumstances is I've had clients that have sat down and they want to be as legally aggressive as they possibly can on a tax return, right? They want the best tax result they possibly can. And with many of those clients, they don't have what I call a true tax problem. Now they do relative to themselves in their own household, right? It's all relative, but they don't have what I would say is a real true tax problem. A lot of clients sometimes are in some of the lower tax brackets, right? They're not in that top marginal federal tax bracket in California's top bracket. So they don't have real problems. Where a lot of those clients have problems with, they've not generated enough assets or accumulated enough wealth, and they've not accumulated enough stuff to have real tax problems. And so that's one of the things that candidly is a passion of mine, would be to help clients create a tax problem.
Get them to that point.
Yeah, get to that point to where you've created a real problem, where you've got real issues. And that sounds weird, but invariably when we're going about it like that, it's better for the client because they are better off financially. They accumulate more assets and more wealth. I'm better off because then it becomes more complex of an engagement. They're starting to acquire rental properties and maybe they're forming LLCs and they're starting businesses and doing different things like that.
Looking at trusts, for example.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah, they become differently significant.
I just want to clarify, when you say business, I do probably, I don't know, I'm not the main focus of my practice, but I do, a fair amount of LLCs and corporations every year for local businesses. Are those something that you say as like the business client? So just could be a mom and pop, S corp.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay, so you're not talking about has to be 400 employees.
No. We have a lot of clients that might be single or multiple owner S corporation or partnership. A lot of typical small business here, Kyle. We have some clients that I consider to be on the larger side, but the bulk of our clients are relatively small, local mom and pop type businesses. Right. Okay. We serve those better than we do that typical just 1040 client. And so we do a lot of 1040s, but I would say if you said, where's our sweet spot, it's that business owner. And it's a typical small business. It really is. So,
which to me is the background of the backbone of the country. So I
sure.
Working with them and being involved with them, which is one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast, honestly, is being able to meet them, see what they're doing out, especially in our local community.
Right.
All right, Johnny. Well, I appreciate you coming in.
No, thank you, Kyle. It's been fun to be on the podcast with you.
Yeah,
and
talk a little bit more, about us. So it's been fun, but I can't let you go that quickly.
Okay.
I got a couple questions for you. Right?
Tell me.
On a personal level. All right, 3 questions. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Rapid fire.
So I'm usually asking this, by the way, and I've never thought it relative to me and how I've got to answer this. Right. So this will be interesting.
Well, one of them you recommend so many. I'm going to start with that one because it's easy. But if you only can recommend one, because I have about 4 books in my office that I know you've given me over the years. But if you can recommend one book for our listeners to read, what would it be?
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Wasn't that the one that was written in
back in the 30s, 40s? Yeah. It's kind of an interesting book in my world because, everybody goes, well, obsession with money or whatever. But Napoleon Hill says in the book, it's about think and grow rich in whatever it is that drives you, right? It could be think and grow rich in parenting. It could be think or grow rich in, giving to your community, right? And so the book is a motive. It's, one of the first original true motivational books that kind of ever existed back in kind of that world of inspiration and motivation. And so it's interesting because it was written in the 30s, I think it was the 30s, because it was written then, and so it has some old language. The style of the language. It has some old characters, some names that you go, I remember that person from history or whatever. But it's about becoming obsessed with something that you want to be good at, and then driving and pushing to be the best that you can be.
Can't argue with that.
Listen, the right level of motivation, the right level of drive is the foundation of everything else, right? All the other books that we can go, hey, how do I want to be a great accountant? Well, there's plenty of books on there about how to be a great attorney or accountant or whatever. But what's your real obsession about being great in the first place? How committed are you to being great in the first place?
Amen. Greatest mentor in your life?
You know what, Kyle? That's a tough one, and that is a really tough question for me because I've asked that question of a lot of people, and I hear their answers, and you know, I don't know. I got to tell you, one of the best business mentors was in fact Rick Williams, and I mentioned Rick earlier.
You did.
The interesting part is when I effectively sold my first accounting practice to him or whatever, we didn't have the best relationship in the world, right? I was kind of going out, and there at times it was tense and things like that. But if I have to look back and go, okay, well, who had a real influence on my life and kind of challenged me in a lot of ways, real impact, was one. Another one that I got to mention this, and this guy's my competitor, but I absolutely love him and adore him. 2 doors down from you, Wayne Long. And so another CPA here in town. He and I talk really frequently. We talked yesterday. And so he's not a mentor in the sense that he doesn't call me and go, hey, here's what you need to do ABC next. But he's an inspiration. Wayne's driven, to be successful, and he's done a really good job in the accounting profession. And so, from my profession, I would say those two guys. Rick Williams had a lot of direct influence on me because I was his partner for a long time, and I didn't give him enough class and appreciation and respect probably while I was his partner.
But now you are.
But now I am, and I've told him so since I've kissed him and told him so. And then I would say maybe somebody like Wayne Long. So
okay, last but not least, this is gonna be an easier one. I at least hope an easier one. Beatles or Stones?
Stones. I'm a Stones guy.
I love you, John, but that hurts.
Well, so I love you. Listen, the truth of it is they're both phenomenal.
All right, you can't go wrong.
No, you can't go wrong with either one of them. The Stones are a little bit of a newer group than the Beatles were, and just love Mick Jagger and love their music. I just do. So yeah, I think if you said I had to pick one, definitely would be a Stones guy. So,
all right, well, I still love you.
Right.
All right, Johnny, thanks for coming in, and see you soon.
All right, thanks, Kyle.
This show has been brought to you by the Law Office of Kyle Jones, Troy Burton with the Lynn Company, CPA John Duffield, Scott Hansen Real Estate Lender, Broker and Investor, and Shannon Eckroth with the Eckroth Sales and Marketing Agency, LLC. You've been listening to the Our 2 Cents podcast. Check out the show notes for links and more information about the show. Also visit our website at our2centspodcast.com or catch us on Instagram at Our 2 Cents Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe